Matthew 25 tells us exactly how we're going to be judged and how we're going to be saved. By feeding the hungry, by healing the sick, by welcoming the stranger, which is more timely now than it's ever been before. There's nothing in Matthew 25 about reading your Bible. There's nothing about going to church. There's nothing about being a good Christian. It is all about how you treat other people.
Welcome into a special Friday Culture Review episode of the Under God Podcast. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Nate. I'm joined by Pastor Stephen Martin and Pastor Daniel Hayworth, who's going to take us through the headlines. And man, we got some stuff to talk about and a lot to say about it.
Yeah, we've got quite a few things to get to today. As always, it's the most special because you're here with us this Friday, Pastor Nate. So we're excited.
I weaseled my way back in. You guys doing those StreamYard stuff from all over the country? Here we are. Back in the studio.
We were both just working so hard. That's all that it was. It was good to be with everyone last week.
We were doing stuff.
We were busy. I don't know what you're doing. Yeah.
Spring break. Having a good time. How was Utah, by the way? Did you guys have a good time in Utah?
Outed me. It was good. It was great. We have some great headlines to get to today. Honestly, some not so great headlines as well, which is sort of how it always is. I'm excited to talk about all sorts of things from Trump's brilliant move to put ICE in the airports, which I did go to Utah. It's okay. Sometimes we take time off here too. And I went to Utah and I have to say it was the worst airport experience on the way out that I've ever had. And on the way back, it was perfectly fine. And I think that there's a lot to be said there, not only on the effectiveness of it, but I think it's getting a lot of good PR for the administration, which ICE sorely needs as well. We're going to talk about this breaking story from just yesterday where Joe Kent, who we talked about on the show last week and he previously resigned, has had some nasty things to say in the defense of Tyler Robinson. I believe he's going to weigh in a way that I think is really unseemly. We'll get to that. We'll get to the recent update on the SAVE Act, and we'll talk about whether or not my pessimism or Pastor Stephen's optimism are more likely given this week's update. And then we'll talk about this very odd story that took the news for like a day of left-wing activists going to Cuba to show why communism is so great. So all of that and more here. As we open, Pastor Stephen, how are you doing this morning?
You know what? I am actually doing really good. I'm really rested. I love the headlines that we have today. You know, and I was talking to a friend earlier just about why we started this podcast. You know, I started asking men how much they consumed of podcast media, and I realized that it was absolutely hours. And I started taking a look at, you know, all the different people that they were listening to, and they weren't all bad. Some of them were better than others for sure. But I started just asking the question, like, where's the pastor's voice? Like, what are we doing to help people think biblically about what's going on? And so that's really the point of the Under God Podcast. We're going to cover lots of current events as we do every single week, but it's also that the believer can be just firmly footed and grounded in really a biblical worldview on what's happening. And you know, when you do that, you tend to be able to see clearly. You know, one of the gifts from God when you know His Word is discernment. And I think it's more important today than ever before to really discern the times that we're in so that we can be led by God to act accordingly. So I'm excited about it.
I agree, Pastor Stephen. And so that brings us to our first headline for the morning, which is yesterday, Joe Kent, who for our listeners, the story we covered last week was Joe Kent was a former head of counterterrorism under Trump administration, and he basically went on what I thought was just an absolute anti-Israel rant so that he could exit office. He resigned, and he said it was over the Iran war and how he was sort of playing out this, we're a puppet state of Israel sort of narrative that you see proliferated by lots of people with bad interests on both the right and the left, sort of this horseshoe right and left that you see a lot of these people, these Tuckers, these Candaces, and then your Cenk Uygurs and all these people who somehow find, make a love child out of the Israel topic, and they're just married to themselves on this topic where everything is Israel's fault, everything is the Jews' fault. Joe Kent, the head of counterterrorism, basically resigns and says, I can't be a part of any of this. But then it turns out that he was probably just trying to get ahead of some negative stories about the ways that he had handled his own office.
Well, he was under investigation for leaking.
Yeah, for leaking. Yeah, he was leaking classified information or at least very sensitive information. And so we think that he was trying to get ahead of that. And so you've seen this story sort of spiral since we talked about it last week. It was breaking news when we talked about it last week. And so this is breaking news now today, which is that since that spiraled and some more of that has come out, he came out yesterday and he made what I thought was really just a disgusting remark, which was that he said he would be willing to testify in the defense trial of Tyler Robinson, who's the assassin of Charlie Kirk, if it would help us get to the truth, alluding obviously to the fact that he thinks that what Candace has been spewing for months and months and months is just absolutely baseless nonsense, that the Jews were at the heart of Israel or of Charlie's assassination and not guy dating a transgender furry, and that it's left-wing violence. He's pushing that narrative and saying, I would be going so far as to be an expert witness in the defense trial. I think that's a huge betrayal of trust. He was somebody who knew Charlie. He leaked texts from Andrew Colvett that he had texted right after in an attempt to sort of frame things better for himself. But ultimately, I thought it was gross. I thought it was a betrayal of all sorts of trust and a certain dishonor to his own name and to everything that he claims to be. What do you think?
I think a couple things. I think, first of all, conservatives, Christians, I don't think you can be a Christian and not be a conservative.
Yeah, because what are you conserving?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got to be real careful. We always look at the left and we look down on them, as we should. They don't ever essentially police their fringes. They're crazies. And as a result, the left has taken over the entire Democratic Party. I think that there's also a chance. I think it's a small chance because we have some great leaders. Trump's doing a great job. But we also have to police the crazies on our side too. And these are a lot of people that didn't used to necessarily present themselves like that. But as they continue to talk, as these things continue to happen, I think we again need to be shrewd as serpents, gentle as doves. One of the things I find really interesting about Joe Kent, Tucker Carlson, all of these people that are essentially prognosticating the fact that the United States is being essentially the tail wags the dog, and that Trump is some puppet. First of all, do you know anything about Donald Trump? I mean, to think for a second that he's just going to let another world leader push him around. First of all, he's never been like that in any other scenario that we've seen. And so I think that this is one of those things where it's real deceptive, it's real dishonest. They're coming out saying, man, they really love Trump, and so they really want him to watch out, but they don't actually have the courage to just say that they're essentially daily on their podcast saying that he's an Israeli stooge, which is probably one of the oldest blood libels. The Jews are behind everything. I mean, it's like and it's really disappointing, but I think being able to like really see through some of that and really take a look at the past. I mean, usually you can see, evidence of issues in someone's past. We've never seen Trump be a stooge of anyone. However, Tucker was on the neocon side of just about everything just a short 10 years ago. Yeah. And so he keeps doing this flip-flopping thing, and he's really unhinged. And Joe Kent, they're close, and a lot of the leaks and Tucker's just asking questions probably was a lot of innuendo from Joe Kent. And the last many months, the entire Iran situation, the administration's come out and said, hey, they already knew that he was a problem. He was possibly leaking, and he wasn't even on the inside of any of that. And I will say he was all for intervening in Iran not too many months ago.
When it was politically expedient for him. Now it's politically expedient again. What bothers me about all this is it's becoming a familiar pattern to see people that are America first until they're not, until they go back and revert back in some cases to institutional loyalty, to weird neocon systems, or now I've got to make myself distinct within conservatism. I've got to be the outsider because I want to raise my profile, which I think is what a lot of these folks are doing. But there's some more sinister stuff going on as well connected to this. I saw a story this morning connected about Kash Patel's girlfriend, and who knows how far this goes, but essentially saying that all of these four people linked together are part of some greater scheme to undermine everything that America's trying to do in Iran right now. And again, so that they can exploit and speak blood libel claims against Israel. So Candace, Tucker, all of this, that there's something going on deep under the surface. I don't know how far it goes, but I know it's sinister, it's dark, it's evil.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, a lot of what you're talking about there is there's a group of people who, when you talk about political expedience, the question really comes down to this question of, do I love the right, meaning do I love what's right, or do I love myself and my own career? And I think that that's ultimately when you look at people who are holding office, a lot of times, they can vote the right way because they think it's the thing that's going to keep getting them elected and not because it's the thing that is going to actually take care of what's right. And you can look at the way that people behave and the incentive structures that are there, and you have to be willing to upset the people that even said that they supported you when you ran sometimes if you're looking at something and you're saying this is the right thing to do, which I think Trump did when he did everything with Iran, because he knew that there's a large portion, though not a dominant portion of, because the polls still show that overwhelmingly the base
he hasn't lost his
supports
base.
it. Yeah. But there's people who were like, hey, we're never gonna fire another rocket again. It's almost like as loyal to that idea as the Quakers were in the Revolution. Like we're never gonna, and no matter what, they can like kill my kids and I won't do it. And Trump said, I'm gonna upset some of those people, but it's the right thing to do. And it seems like, in Joe Kent's case, he's just choosing the thing that's gonna help him the most. And so that says, okay, you're probably more of a wolf in sheep's clothing than you are actually somebody that we should rely on for information or have any degree of trust in. He also said that he made a statement, the FBI wouldn't let me go anywhere near it. They wouldn't let me touch it. And my thought is, why would they? You're
not your
it's not
job.
your job. You're not involved in that. It doesn't make sense, but it sort of it allows him to get these sound bites and get on podcasts. And, I'm sure that within a year there will be like a forthcoming book tour, because that's what these guys do.
And here's what I'll say too, and this is something that we've got to watch out for on the left and the right, particularly right now on the right, is what he's really setting himself up to be is he's going to make himself a martyr.
Yeah.
He's a martyr of this great system that was really against him. When you really actually look at all the details, he's actually a disloyal scumbag. I mean, he met with J.D. Vance before he resigned. He had that strongly worded letter that was full of all kinds of innuendos about a situation he actually was not even involved in. J.D. Vance actually did the right thing and said, hey, you need to take this directly to President Trump. Did he do that? No, he didn't. He then released it. And then we find out that he's under investigation prior to his resignation for actually being a leaker. And so we got to really watch this, because this is what all these guys will do. I mean, you already see Tucker doing this. You already say, I'm essentially, they martyr themselves, but really they're both the arsonist,
they're like pouring gasoline and lighting a match and then being like,
why am I on fire?
Yeah.
And so we just have to watch and again, just watch and really pay attention to that, because it can be disconcerting. And this is something that I want to speak to, because I tell people in our church constantly, it's like, listen, you're a Christian. We teach the Bible here. You follow me in as much as I follow Christ and teach the word. This is the same way with these influencers and these podcasters. And you know what? You don't always get you don't get the sunshine without the rain sometimes. And sometimes you can't see the rain because they're really great on certain issues.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to listen to Tucker quite a bit. I haven't recently for several reasons, not few of which are he's a raging anti-Semite and is wearing Christianity as a skin suit. But even before that, he had some great ideas when he's talking about America first. And I think back to the 2024 election where Trump won in a landslide. Tucker was a big part of that. He has relationships with people in the administration. He's close with J.D. Vance. And I think it's just really important that we're adults here. It's like, just like I tell believers in our church, it's like, listen, in as much as I'm following Christ and teaching the word, follow me. And I think it's interesting. These guys can be right on some things and wrong on some things. And we have to be able to, be like, yeah, you're right on that, but you're wrong on this other thing. And the thing with Israel, I'll just hit, that is like, Charlie Kirk said this over and over again.
Yes.
It's like a brain rot disease.
It rots your brain.
It completely messes you up and skews your view. And I find it particularly offensive when guys like Tucker, ladies like Candace, Joe Kent, when they always talk, hey, I'm just asking questions. Where's the virtue in asking questions? The only virtue in asking questions is if you're actually seeking the truth.
Right.
And it's evidence that when truth is presented to them, when the overwhelming evidence, even from Tyler Robinson's family, they're not acting in any way as a family would if their son was actually not guilty.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And then to just pile on to a family that's already grieving, a great organization that was at its pinnacle and their founder was taken out, to just pile on
trying to destroy it. Yeah.
is just insane.
It's disgusting.
It's just
And
insane.
as we're trying to help people think biblically, you got to remember the spirit behind a question. Anytime you hear a question, what's the spirit behind it? Because it does sound reasonable to say, isn't it okay to ask some questions? And the answer to that is sometimes. But if the question is, did God really say? If that's the spirit behind the question, it's not a good question. And in fact, it's actually an accusation that's framed in the form of a question. And so believers have to have the discernment that Adam and Eve did not have in the garden. We have that story there to teach us a lesson that when someone comes and asks a question from a deceptive spirit, you've got to be able to sniff that out as a believer. Use the Holy Spirit. We talk about this a lot. You talk about this a lot. I want to preach with the Bible in one hand, a newspaper in the other. Well, listen, I want to exercise my ears with one to the person talking and one to the Holy Spirit, acting as a filter for whatever it is that I'm hearing.
Yeah, really I agree with that. And the last thing I want to say on this, and then what we can do, I think, is we can talk about the war itself for a minute, because Trump came out yesterday and said some people have a present for us, and I'm excited to talk about what that is. Yeah, every day I log on and Trump does the funniest thing he's ever done. I mean, we'll get to that here in a second. But I do want to talk about this thing, because my first reaction when I saw this is we have completely, as a society and as a culture, and really as men, neglected the concept of honor. And I looked at what Joe Kent did, and I just thought, you're leaking private text messages. I've thought this about everyone who's out there leaking their dead friends' text messages to make their own points online.
So
but
sick.
Even especially in this case, when it's being twisted and used for such vile purposes, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, where's your honor? Honor is a big deal to the Lord, and we don't talk about it hardly at all in the American church anymore. I think, we've talked about this at length, which is that our church really tries to do a good job talking about that, because we've forgotten, and it's one of these virtues that we have completely left to history because we've thought that we've risen above it or something else. And a lot of these guys, they come out and they're saying, well, I'm just speaking my truth or my truth to power. And it's like, did you consider what the honorable thing to do was? You were given a position by a man, the most powerful man in the world, in order to serve your nation. And instead you've chosen to serve yourself. Where's the honor in that? Where's the dignity in serving your friend who died as a martyr for Christianity? What are you serving? Are you really so dishonorable that your position and your influence are to be stewarded only for yourself and not for the positions which you were put in, or the purpose that God gave you on this earth? Have you no respect for those things, or for the people that put you in those places or in those rooms to begin with? I can't help but think that if we were to reclaim some honor culture in our society, so many of the problems that we see in the news media would just go away, because people would stop and they would say, is this the right thing to do? Is it the honorable thing to do? Is it the moral thing to do? Instead of, is it the thing that's going to get me the most clicks online? And I think that's really at the heart of what's happening.
Well, the sad thing about Joe Kent too is that, he did serve in the armed forces, valiantly.
Honorably for a long time.
He lost his wife.
Yeah.
And it is really sad to see that not too many years later, I think the average person would look and go, man, if I ever had to be in a foxhole with someone, it wouldn't be with somebody like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, honor is something that takes a long time to build. It takes a long time to garner respect, to garner, a reputation, but it takes very little to destroy.
Yeah.
And I think, it is really sad to see just kind of how far he's fallen and with the friends he's fallen in. And I tell people in our church this all the time. It's like, you've got to be really careful with the people that you're listening to, with the people, that you're receiving from, because all faith comes by hearing. Faith, in the words about Christ, we know that's true in Romans 10:17, but the opposite's also true. This downward spiral to cynicism, never being able to trust anyone, including God, also comes from seeds that come in your ears. Who's whispering to you? I'll tell believers this, you mentioned this, the difference between, the voice of the Holy Spirit and the voice of the accuser is God always asks questions that lead to truth.
Right.
Truth about who you are, truth about your true intentions, truth about what's really going on. There's always a truth motivation, and the devil's always making accusations. Yeah. There's always accusations. What I find so interesting about the Tyler Robinson thing, all of these Jewish connections, I've been around, the basic, people. I've been around powerful people. I've been around politicians, and to think that they could contrive some incredibly multifaceted scheme, over decades and decades, just defies common sense. Most of them,
the greatest conspiracy in the history of the world, which has been carried out somehow for all of time in all places, and everyone's kept it a secret.
Yeah, and Google Occam's razor. The simplest, most direct reason for something probably is the reason for something. And I think it does lend to this hyper conspiratorial thing that really bleeds over even into your own faith.
Yeah.
If you're not careful, the people that you're listening to, all of a sudden, you start judging people by their actions and yourself by your intentions. And it's like, well, nobody can see your intentions. Yeah. And so, I think that I always say sin helps you see the best in yourself and the worst in others. And when you're around people that's like kind of what they do for a living, or that seems to be the thing they do every single episode all the time, it doesn't mean we don't address things and we don't, expose things. The Bible says we're responsible for exposing evil as believers. But when every single thing is always leading you to doubt, to mistrust, to spiral down this, hole of cynicism, it's probably not a godly thing.
Yeah, completely agree with that, Pastor. And that leads us into our next topic, which is just the update on the Iran war. And I am excited about this because Trump yesterday comes out and he says, somebody has a present for us.
It's a great present. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's a great present. It's the best. It's going to make us very rich. No, it's not nuclear, but it has to do with oil.
Yeah. And I literally am watching this clip and I'm thinking, we will never have another president who's so good at his job.
Please don't say
so
that.
Funny.
I hope we do. But
he's so hilarious. I mean, well, I think that in the last week, I've seen 3 clips of Trump where I just thought this has to be the funniest thing he's ever done. It started actually with, did you guys see the clip of him with the Japanese prime minister?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
the Pearl Harbor clip.
We should talk about that.
Amazing.
Yeah, so he goes on.
The Japanese reporter, I could cover this. A Japanese reporter is literally, they're in the Oval Office at a bilat, they're having a little press conference, and a Japanese reporter asks, hey, Mr. President, why didn't you tell your allies like what was going on?
Why did you not
Why
tell
didn't
us?
you tell us that you were going to attack? And he just kind of goes, well, what do you mean? I didn't tell anybody. Yeah. I mean, the Japanese should understand this. You didn't tell us about Pearl Harbor. And I mean, the look on the prime minister's face.
Like the Japanese prime minister, like you are to me, right here.
Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor?
She was like looking just deadpan straight ahead. It was so funny.
My gosh, yeah, it was hilarious. I thought this has to be the funniest thing a president has ever said. And then I see a clip of him later on in the week, and he's just standing there listening to the vice president give a briefing, and he's basically like miming in the background. He's just like doing the eyebrows thing, and JD will say something and go, I'm watching this, and I'm like, the guy is always on. And then I see him in this clip where he's just talking, and he's not even trying to be funny, and he's just like, they give us a great president. It's the best president we've ever been given. It's oil.
By the way, I'm not going to tell you, but it's oil related.
Yeah, it's oil related. And I'm just thinking, this is great. Like, I don't know. It's the best sitcom you could ever live through. Is just tuning in to like the clips the White House puts
Listen,
online.
the great thing about Donald Trump, and this is what is so great, and this is what makes him an incredible deal maker. I always tell people, he's been on the scene politically really since 2015. Yeah. But he's been in our culture for decades. Yeah. And all you have to do to know everything you need to know about Donald Trump is read The Art of the Deal. And it's so funny, all of these people, just every time he does something like this, every time he's kind of vague or he says 2 different things in the same conversation, he's deal making. And what it's doing is it's actually putting Iran on their heels. They don't really know what he's going to do. And that unpredictability, he's just completely comfortable in that space. And here's why. For years, I mean, they changed the Department of War to the Department of Defense. We've been in this defensive posture. We don't win wars anymore.
Other way around.
We get into
yes.
The Department of War was
we went
first.
From defense.
War was first.
Oh, and now we're
the Department of War, then the defense, and we have these little quagmires where we come in and nothing's ever really finished, and there's no real objective, and we don't really win wars anymore. To now, he's going in. No, we're going to come in and we're going to crush them. We're going to win.
Yeah.
We're going to even his use of unconditional surrender. All the analysts and all of the TV network shows are like, well, does he actually know what that means? And does that mean this? And does that mean? It means literally. It means they lose, we win. It's as simple as that. And I really do think that's a massive shift. Now, when you look at the 250 years of our nation's history, that's not abnormal. As a matter of fact, a lot of leaders, FDR had the same attitude that Donald Trump had, totally different ideology. He was a progressive, but we definitively won World War II and pushed an unconditional surrender,
Crazy
on the
how
axis.
we used to believe as a country it was good to win the war and not to lose it. Now it's like the boomers tell us, and I'm sorry, Pastor Nate, but the boomers.
I'm not a boomer.
I'm just kidding.
He is not a boomer.
I'm kidding. Anyway, to me, everyone is. Anyway,
that's true.
I
won't look down on your youth.
The boomers are like, they used to tell us, we heard this all throughout Iraq and Afghanistan, that the only way that it was a moral war was if we like didn't get anything out of it, if we didn't get anything from it, if we basically like only did the one moral thing, which is, taking away weapons of mass destruction and killing the Taliban. Like that was the only way. We couldn't like take the oil. We couldn't benefit our own country. Our country actually only was allowed to sacrifice and not to benefit. And that's a inversion of all of the history of war. Also, it's a perversion of just war theory. It's not actually what just war theory has said at all, and which is what Christianity is held to ever since it's been written. None of that is in any of just war doctrine that any military force has ever held. But we've believed that for at least the last 20 or so years. And one of the things I love about Trump is he's like, yeah, we should have taken the oil.
Yeah.
And they ask him after Venezuela. So they come in and they say, hey, what are you going to do with that big oil tanker? And he goes, well, I think we're going to keep it. I was like, yeah.
Well, you're going to keep the ships too? Yeah, we're keeping the ships too.
We're going to keep them. They're ours now. What do you mean? We won. We keep the stuff. And I think that's actually a good thing because it tells people that we are better stewards of those things than the nations to which they're given. And we actually built up all the oil in Iran anyway. I don't know if you guys...
It was all American companies.
It was all American companies.
Right.
So
it was taken.
It's kind of ours.
Yeah,
anyway.
I know I'm going to try not to sound like a broken record, but there's a great book called The Fourth Turning. Everyone needs to read it. There's another great book called The Accidental Superpower.
We'll put it in all the show notes from the first episode to
just copy and paste it because I really believe every Christian should read these because it firmly grounds your feet into the time that we're in so you can understand what actually is happening. And we've gone through moments like this in our past. But when you go back to World War II, every nation in human history that has ever found themselves the victor while the rest of their even allies and their enemies are utterly decimated, which is what World War II was. It's what happened after World War II. They've essentially empire built. And a lot of people say the great American empire, America's not an empire. As a matter of fact, we did the opposite. And, when the allies came and gathered in Bretton Woods, and we were looking at the post-World War II order and all of Europe, it's just decimated. Their economies are in shambles. We were virtually untouched because of, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, which are pretty awesome. And so they come and they fully expected us to do what every other nation did. And instead of actually colonizing and expanding territory and empire, we actually sacrificed ourselves and committed to actually defend maritime trade for everyone. Yeah. And that really put a pause on how the entire world operated post or pre-World War II.
It really was, it was the only time in history that such a thing had been done where we had said, we are going to volunteer our Navy and our ships to protect everybody else and we're not going to tax or charge you. No other empire had ever operated that way. So you're literally talking about the reorientation of the entire global order through that one thing.
Which, by the way, it had incredible effects.
Yes.
I mean, economies that never, because of geography and location and because of their surroundings, could have ever become powers, became powerful. But here's what's happened. It's created essentially this nanny state where it's our Navy that's doing all of the work. It's our taxpayers that are paying all of it, while Europeans enjoy 3-day work weeks and 8 weeks of vacation. It's hollowed out our middle class. And I think Trump's coming on the scene going, okay, you guys are not the same as you were after World War II.
Yeah.
You've built economies. You've completely rebuilt, but now you're still expecting us to pay for everything.
Yeah.
To which case, I think there's a high likelihood in this scenario that we go in and we, rip Iran apart where they can't be a threat. They can't project power, but we literally turn and go, okay, guys, like we don't need this. I mean, we have the greatest shale fields ever.
Yeah, right.
We have plenty of oil.
We have Texas. We don't need you.
Yeah, exactly. You guys need to actually defend yourself. To which case,
we could have Mexico if we just had the courage.
Well, you never know. You never know. Maybe the next guy. Who knows? Maybe this president. Who knows? Maybe Trump will do that in his 4th or 5th term.
In his 4th or 5th term.
Maybe Trump will do that in his 4th or 5th term.
I think one of the reasons we've ended up where we are, we've talked about this on our podcast a lot, the difference between cultural justice and biblical justice, and what we've seen is people have adapted and adopted really a Marxist version and a Marxist definition of what is just. And what you're talking about is actual justice. It's where the right thing happens for the right reasons. And we've twisted that up, and we've twisted it up for generations, which is why everybody is now thinking, oh, well, to your point, well, you just have to go do this one thing and take nothing from it. That's actually not just. Yeah. And I think I got to come back to this because we talk a lot here also about Romans 13. And I just want to remind everybody listening, Romans 13 is a description of what a good and godly government is. And so we are doing right now to the forces of evil what we're supposed to do. Rulers are not a cause of terror for a good deed, but for bad conduct, right? If you're doing what's right, you're going to have no problem with them. When you do what's wrong, you should expect to be punished by them. That's literally what we are doing. That's what our government is. So our government is reclaiming what it means to be a good, a just, a righteous, a godly government. And because people confuse church and government, and they don't understand the role of government, and they have a Marxist version of justice, all of this gets turned into a confused blob in the minds of a lot of Christians. You have to understand, a good and godly government is supposed to use the sword, and they're supposed to do it in a just way. And everything you've just described is what justice would really look like. Actually bringing this to a proper conclusion.
So we've got it figured out on the foreign policy front. That's great. Now, if we can only move it to the blue cities and the neo-Confederates, maybe then we could actually bring
or even
biblical
to
justice there too.
Our own
It's a great
rhino,
segue for the SAVE Act, by the way.
Our own rhino representatives. Pastor Stephen, when we talked about the SAVE Act last week, I was a Debbie Downer, and I was like, I don't think they're going to do anything, and you were a lot more positive. I just need to gauge, where's your positivity at? How do you feel
Here's what I'm going to say. I'm just going to say it. Where there's a will, there's a way. The grassroots, the America First movement, MAGA, we've experienced great success where we have actually exercised our will, even against huge odds. I mean, many of our candidates, they get outspent 25-1, and they still end up winning. And so, this kind of traditional, like, you just got to have $1 bajillion and whoever has the money wins. Maybe that can be true too. But when we find ourselves in a cultural moment where it's like the things that are happening aren't working, I think we have a great opportunity to lend will. Rob McCoy says this all the time. It's like our politicians are acting out a script we give them. Guess what? We can, as the sovereign, we can actually change the script. And I think that's what you're seeing in the Senate right now. Now, obviously, is there an uphill climb because of 60 years of the silent generation piling on, bureaucracy and the deep states, constantly trying to, push back on a representative government? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean we still don't apply the will. I'm happy with what I'm seeing. Mike Lee in the Senate, I mean, they're trying to figure out a way, at first it's like performative, and it may still be just like getting them all on the record. I hope it's not. But there's a good chance as they're getting it out there, as they're putting pressure on the Democrats. I mean, I think Chuck Schumer actually said he doesn't oppose voter ID, which opened up a total landslide on him, where they're just starting to change the subject now. The truth is, they want anyone legal or illegal to vote in this country, because the Democrat Party, listen, they would never win another election if the shenanigans that have went on in 2020, I believe some of them were still there in 2024. If the structure of our elections were secure, they just wouldn't. And so I think we have a great opportunity. I think Americans need to demand it. They are. There's momentum there. We're putting their feet to the fire. I pray that they move to a standing filibuster. They've talked about reconciliation. They're actually starting to talk about ways to get it done. Now, the pressure, the will from Trump was excellent. What the Attorney General of Texas did, running against John Cornyn, saying, hey, I'll drop out if you guys get the SAVE Act done, really put the Senate on notice. And we're starting to see we're starting to see some movement there. Is it all going to happen all at once? Are we going to get everything we want? Well, welcome to, this side of heaven. It's just not going to happen. But that doesn't mean we still don't exercise our will for righteous purposes and to righting the wrong. So that's my optimism. I mean, I'm alive and breathing. I mean, I think that as long as you're not dead and you still, are following God, and you can still bring His will into everything that you do. And so, Daniel, I would just say, read your Bible, spend some time with God, like get your head right, and let's leave. Here's what I would say.
Worn my boots.
Here's
today.
what I would say, Pastor Daniel. Revival starts with you. That's what I would say.
Oh my God.
Revival starts with you.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It does start with me, and my pessimism.
Respond to that.
Oh my gosh!
Can I get a box of popcorn? I'm just going to listen to this for a minute.
He's actually gotten better for our listeners. He's gotten better. The more time he's been in the Word, the more time he's been under good godly leadership.
He got saved a few months ago.
He's been getting a lot better.
Everyone still prays for me in the back room every time before I go on stage. They're like, "Hey, we just pray that he's actually saved before he goes out on stage."
I know you're definitely saved.
So my pessimism doesn't come from the fact that I believe it's hopeless, or the fact that I even believe we're allowed to despair, because I don't believe that. I actually think that's a sin for believers. My pessimism comes from having watched a Senate body politic on the GOP side that I think has chosen over and over and over again, and you alluded to it, but like, there has not been a primary that has been lost by a Republican in the United States since 2012.
Senate. Yeah.
And since then, it was 1994 before that. And so the primary that we have going on is a forcing function right now.
You mean an incumbent?
An incumbent losing.
Hasn't lost. Ran for re-election in the Senate since 2012.
And so most of these guys that are in there, they actually don't believe that they have any reason to feel pressure from the right, meaning that they don't have a reason to feel like the right-wing part of the voting base can force them into more right-wing policies, because they look at it and they've built a system that allows their fundraising to be different, and they have allowed themselves media rules that are different, and they've just given themselves such an advantage that they think they don't have to listen to the further right side of the coalition, when they think that, okay, the thing I need to do is I need to actually moderate, quote unquote, be more towards the left-wing part of our coalition, because I don't want to lose the general election. I'm more concerned with that than I am about a primary.
How's that working for John Cornyn right now?
Well, right now, this is the thing, and that's why this
There's just moments.
That's why this is the national story, and that's why what Ken Paxton did was so effective, because for the first time, he brought a light to this issue and was like, you guys aren't doing anything, and you haven't been doing anything for a long time. And that's what I look at is, this is one senator, and now he's trying to get everyone on board too, because he's like, hey, I don't want to lose my primary. But the truth is, the body as a whole has been so inept for so long that I struggle to believe that they're going to actually get everything. Now, maybe they get voter ID across. If they even just got voter ID, that would be a huge win. The Save America Act, Trump put in some stuff that I think is civilizationally important, like the transgender stuff in as well. I think we should get the whole thing passed. I think that a determined group of Republican senators actually could do this if they had the willpower to. I believe that's all true. I believe the base could even force them to do it. I want that to be true, but I'm not convinced that it is true, because the way that I see them behaving is so many of them are still paying lip service without actually sitting down and going, this is what it's going to take, and here's how we're going to get it done. It's like when you have somebody come, and it's like you have your kid come to you, and you say, hey, did you clean your room like I told you to? And they say, well, and you know that everything that follows after that is just reasons they didn't clean their room.
Right.
And that's what I feel like we're getting. But if you go to your kid and you say, hey, did you clean the room? And their answer is, I'm in the middle of it. I'm working on it right now. Here's how I'm going to get it done. And, you think, great. That's somebody who actually cares to do the thing that we've asked them to do. I feel like it's a lot more the first and a lot less the second. That's how I currently am looking at the situation.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I think it is important to note that we are in a civilizational shift.
Yes.
In our nation as we approach the 250th, where things are changing. And I think this is something that, being the older person at the table, but not as old as him, but older than you.
Not as old.
I think it is tempting when you're looking at these situations and it just doesn't make sense. Your people want this. Why aren't you doing this? To kind of just light a match and burn it all down. And I think that is an impulse that balances, the slow, sluggish, elders moving through as new leaders come in. But I do think we need to remember that, again, this side of heaven, we have the greatest system on earth. We do. There's never been a constitutional republic that's made it as long as we have, ever, under one constitution. And so there is a lot to look up for. There's still a lot of pressure that we have to put on it. And we have to remember, and this is what I always tell believers who get frustrated, because this happens a lot in our church, where people just go, they didn't do what we wanted to do. They never do what we want to do. And so I'm just going to go buy a bunker and hunker down in Montana.
No, you can't do that. I would never tell people to do that.
No, you would.
With all my cynicism. I would say do everything you can to get it done.
But this is why even all of these horseshoe right podcasters and all these doom and gloom, and they're always, cynical. And I think you can be skeptical without being cynical. Yeah. I think you can trust, but also verify. I think you can put pressure on, to get maximum results and be okay with maybe you got half of what you wanted, but not all of what you wanted. And I think this is what's really dangerous, for the believer, particularly who actually believes that we serve a resurrected Savior, that he saved us, and that we're really living out a prequel. It's to put our shoulder to the wheel, but at the end of the day, like, our trust is in him. And this is what I would always say just to believers. I don't elect a politician, to be an elder in my church or to be my pastor. Yeah. It's like Jesus is never going to be on the ballot. We're always going to have to work with people who have mixed loyalties. We do know that there's some basic truths. When the righteous are in charge, the people celebrate. They're blessed. When the wicked are in charge, they groan. And we spent 4 years under Joe Biden, and I think if there was anything that would wake up the church, it would be the last 4 years. And to your point, I can be really cynical. There's still lots of pastors who are still trying to play like this is the early 1990s, and It's like, it's
that's
just,
true.
we're not in the same situation where we were before. But at the same time, remember, and you said this, despair is a sin for the believer.
That's right.
We have to constantly, as long as there's breath in our lungs and energy, and we're obeying God and looking, we're always engaging. We're contending in the culture. And I tend to see even the fact that we're just having this battle out, where we can actually see what's going on. By the way, this is how the Senate was actually designed to operate.
Yeah.
What they've done over the last several years is they've gotten this backroom consensus, and they never brought anything to the floor that they didn't know exactly what was going to happen. This is actually what legislating looks like in our system. I mean, there's this stupid Senate rules that need to be thrown out, but like, this is actually what it looks like. And I'm going to tell you, I see America looking at this. I mean, 84%, I think in the last poll, said they support voter ID. Yeah. Like, this is bipartisan. This is literally bipartisan.
Across every demographic.
It's really it's a betrayal of their role as representatives, which senators still are. I know we call them that, but they are they're sent there to represent us. And so when 80% of the people are saying we want this and you don't do it, you're betraying your office. I mean, honestly, we should start recalling Republican senators that don't do things that
that's
they say they're supposed to do.
exactly what will happen. But in our system, unlike the French system, which has had, 15 governments in the last, 100 years. In our system, that change is structured. It's a little slower. And sometimes that slowness allows us to not react, but to actually look and go, okay, well, these guys aren't going to do what we said. And that's exactly what's happening to Cornyn. Yeah. He's been in the Senate, 24 years or something here. Yeah. And Texans are looking, going, I don't care what Trump says. I don't like this guy. We're not backing this guy. Yeah. And it's actually putting pressure on Trump. Yeah. Trump could have made his life easier in the Senate.
All the political pressure in the Senate was Trump's, says Trump should endorse, but I think he's recognizing that a lot of the people in Texas are like, dude, we just can't stand this guy. We won't show up for him. And I think that's putting some pressure there too.
Well, they do have options though, and they should take them. I mean, John Thune coming out constantly and saying, we don't have the votes, we don't have the support for this. I'm with you. Mike Lee's pushing for the talking filibuster. Yeah. They should absolutely bring that back, because that brings the back room out onto C-SPAN, where everybody can watch and see and listen and hear what's going on. But even if they don't do that, I like what Trump has said, that he's not gonna sign anything else until this gets done. And so really the most practical move, I think, to the correct place where we want to get is to take the voter ID, attach that to the DHS funding that they need to do right now. And hey, we got a great thing to look at. We've got people who are standing in line in airports waiting to do what? To show their ID and have who they are verified. We need to do the same thing with voting. These things are connected. Even the funding of those things can be connected right now. There is a path forward, and Thune needs to get it done or get out of the way.
Yeah.
By the way, that's a great segue to start talking about the brilliant move.
Ice, baby. Yeah.
So recently I was traveling, and I went to the Austin airport to travel out of Austin to go to Utah for the great crime of taking my children to ski for the first time. Right, I took 3 days off. Pastor Nate never let me live it down.
I'm kidding.
I'm
glad. I'm going to take some time off soon too.
I went and I went 4 hours in advance, because I was like, I've heard the lines are long. It's like spring break in Texas. We're gonna go. It takes me an extra hour just to get into the airport complex in my car, because of how bad traffic was around the airport. So it takes me 2 hours. It's normally an hour drive. It takes me 2 hours just to get and park at the airport, which, as you guys both have flown out of that airport countless times, that's insane. That's insane. Right? 2 hours just to get there.
Pretty wild.
And then once we get in there, it takes us 2 hours to get through the security line. And we had a night flight. We're at the end of the day. Our flight was 8:30 p.m. It should have all been died down. And I stood in that hot, sweaty area by the Southwest check-in that the line is backed up to from the security, with my 2 kids who were crying and not understanding why the line's not moving forward for 2 hours. And I thought
you had 4 kids. You didn't take 2 of the kids?
I did not take 2 of my kids.
So you did all of them off. Okay.
Yeah, the babies can't ski.
But you kept them with someone, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
okay,
I kept them. Look,
when he said hot, sweaty, your face was pretty awesome. If you're watching, just reverse back. Look at his face.
It was I'm literally standing there. It's we haven't even gotten it. And so we leave from my house 4 hours in advance, and we get through security, and we run to our gate, and it's boarding. And I'm like, I've never experienced anything like that at the airport. And it's because the Democrats have refused to fund DHS, which the TSA falls underneath. And so the TSA hasn't been funded. And so there's all these issues going on. And while I'm on my trip, the president makes a glorious announcement. And he says what, Pastor Stephen?
He says, well, we've already funded ICE for 10 years. And so I think we're going to go ahead and move them to the airports, and they're going to give some lift to TSA.
Yes.
Brilliant.
And,
we've talked about this. Obviously, all the stuff in Minnesota, the media's coverage of it, just a complete lying. They've just demonized ICE, and the narrative was really going against ICE. What a brilliant move. I mean, Trump just literally in one swoop brings ICE in. I mean, there were videos of them handing out water bottles.
Every independent voter that's been at an airport has been won over.
It was unbelievable. No mask. It's like they're smiling. There's literally a meme. There was literally a meme, and oh my gosh, it was so funny. There was a meme of an ICE officer offering a water bottle to a Hispanic lady that was coming through a TSA line, and the CNN line was ICE waterboarding immigrant. And it's like, but Trump is very, very good at this. And the truth is, our men and women at ICE, they are law enforcement. I mean, they're not much different than the police officers that protect our communities. I mean, they have a job to do, and they have been just absolutely villainized forward to back. And what a great picture. And it's at the same time, the Democrats are literally, this is brilliant. Trump is solving a problem caused by the Democrats in an effort to shut down ICE. With ICE.
Yes.
It's like, it's absolutely brilliant. And so talk about your experience after ICE took control.
I left early for the airport on the way back because, he had just announced this, and I was like, it probably hasn't happened yet. Nothing is good. And so we go back, we're in Utah, we go back to the airport, and the lady who we were staying with had offered to drive us. We pile the kids in the car, and we drive to the airport. And I did the same thing. I was like, we need 4 hours. I was like, I am not getting stuck here in Utah. We have another night flight. I was like, it's not happening. And so we get there to the Utah airport, and it's this, pretty big airport, but security is right there at the front. And I walk in, and there's no line. And there's people at the check-in with your baggage and everything. And I check in my bags, and I'm a little suspicious. And I know, because you go around the corner at the security for this, and then all of the rows are there, so you can't quite see it. So I was like, you know what? Maybe it's not as good. I'm not going to dare to hope, because I'm still cynical.
Yeah, you can't do that.
I can't do that.
You didn't read your Bible in the morning.
I can't dare to hope. And so, because what happens if you hope and then you tell your children it's going to be great and then it's terrible, you're like, all right, and you got to you got to drug them or something. I don't know. Don't do that to your kids. But anyway, I take my kids and I round the corner and it's empty. It's just completely done. There's nobody there. And it's not that there's not planes. There's just as many planes as when we left. It's just taken care of. And there have been some ICE guys I find out that have come in and they've helped get through all of the crowds and everything. And so the crowds have already been dealt. They've been cleared out. And I walk in the airport, and inside security, it's packed. There's people everywhere. There's all this stuff. But there was no line. I didn't wait in line. And so then instead I waited at Shake Shack for 3 extra hours. I sat there and just fed the kids fries and chocolate milk and waited for our flight. But I was like, I thought it was going to be the same, but within a week of me leaving for the trip and me coming back, it's completely different because Trump has just done one thing to make the lives of every American better. And so I think every spring breaker is officially a Republican now. I mean, I can't see how you would not be.
Well,
even
CNN, who we rarely get good reports from, or even honest reporting, they reported on Monday at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in
with a
Atlanta,
frown on their face.
With a frown on their face on Monday. The lines
were
were
to
over.
inform you your life is better now.
over 3 hours long lines on Monday. On Tuesday, the same lines 45 minutes after ICE was deployed to that airport. I mean, it is making a really big difference. So
and it's
very smart move.
It's just such a good. It's good for people, and it's one of those things that you would do. It's extremely smart politically, obviously, because you're forcing your enemies, like you said, even CNN, to get on there and be like, we're sorry that your life is good, but it's good now. And it forces your enemies to give you credit or to take the side of long lines at the airport. Those are your options.
Okay, I'll be honest. If I have one thing that I want to do before this administration's over, is I just want to be in the room and watch how these conversations go.
Yeah.
Trump has assembled a few people in his cabinet that have to do with it, right? All the people are there, and they're going, sir, there's hours. We're going to have to compromise with the Democrats, and we're going to have to figure something out. The majority leaders are calling. Mike Johnson's he's like, what do you want me to do? And Trump's just sitting there and he's taking it all in, and he just says, why don't we send ICE?
Yeah.
We haven't.
He said it was his idea. Did you see that?
No, that is 100% a Trump idea.
They asked him, they said, whose idea was that? And he goes, it's mine.
No.
Some people don't have good ideas. I have good ideas all the time.
But imagine everybody around the table. Everybody around the table goes, well, but that would, wait a minute.
That'd be great.
What about, no, that's federal. Okay. Let's do that.
That's a great idea. We should totally do that.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I think and then, if you see some people and their passport looks like it's wrong, maybe put them on a separate plane.
Hey,
and
listen.
you kill
two birds with one stone, baby.
That's it. I like it.
I will tell you this. It may have been easier at the airport because there weren't many illegals traveling.
Yeah. They were like,
who knows? They may have steered clear.
They might have just, all the people, I don't think, is there a lot of illegal immigration to Utah? I don't know.
I don't know.
We'll tell.
But they say Houston, I mean, some of these, and what's interesting too, and this goes into some of the Doge efforts, I just think about, all the absenteeism with TSA. And for those of you who don't know how government shutdowns work, it is pretty brutal on these families. I mean, it's not a super high paying job anyways. It's very stressful. If you've ever been through TSA, you're stressed. Imagine how stressed they are.
Right.
And so, these guys go without paychecks forever. The promise is they will be paid. But the absenteeism, them starting to call in sick, getting sick of it. I mean, as this drags on for weeks, what a great solution. I would imagine maybe some of the TSA people are going, well, shoot, if we don't get back, maybe they'll give my job to the ICE guys, and so which they aren't going to because we still have 20 million illegal immigrants that need to leave. And so they'll hopefully get back to work soon.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I wonder if we could go to a segment that I would like to call Christian Cosplay and have our weekly Talarico update. You guys ready to talk about our dear friend?
No, I love
James
this
Talarico.
topic.
I've got
Pastor
a clip
Stephen
I want
actually
you guys
really
to hear.
likes to talk about it because he loves Talarico so much. That's why. Every single week I just give him more and more and more, and his face gets brighter and brighter and brighter every single week.
Yeah. Let's.
Are they eating meat in their campaign yet?
No. All right. Play the clip.
Play that. Okay. We'll save that. But here's the clip you got to hear.
I have met so many Hindus, Buddhists, Sikh, Jews, Muslims, atheists, agnostics who are more Christ-like than some of the Christians I serve with in the Texas legislature.
First of all, does he know what it means to be a Christian at all? I mean, he walks around, preaches. He's got his Bible, with him. I don't even know what to say to start with, but let's just be clear about this. You can't be a Hindu and a Sikh and be Christ-like, because to be Christ-like is to follow the way of the Christ. This guy doesn't even know what it means to be a Christian, and yet he's out here literally just raking in progressive Christians onto his side, people who maybe wouldn't vote because they're uncomfortable with both sides. Oh, this is my Christian guy I can vote for because he talks about kindness and love and not eating meat, but feeding poor people, and he doesn't know the difference between a Sikh and a Christian. He's really jumped the shark, and that's why I call this Christian cosplay.
Yeah, I would just go back into truth and tone. And that's a complete gaslight of Christians. A Christian that stands 100%. On their faith, a Christian that dares to wear a hat that says Gulf of America 25, which I love your hat. A Christian that loves their nation, wants to engage in the public square. All of a sudden, like, you're mean, you're not Christ-like if you oppose, boys being able to invade your girl's bathroom, which is, by the way, all the crap that he pushes in the Texas House. And so I think, first of all, believers need to realize we just need to get comfortable. Here's what I say: keep a soft heart, but a thick skin. Like, it should not matter what reprobates, heretics like Talarico have to say about your faith when he's not even a Christian. And here's what I will say. I do think this is a very intelligent ploy by the Democrats. I don't think it's going to work. I think what they're trying to do is Beto 2.0, except with the Christian facade. They're trying to give a permission structure for Christians to vote Democrat, which there is no permission structure if you actually go to truth. Now, they think it's going to work, and there's lots of money that's obviously coming in from all of the regular players, the regular outside money pouring in. But I actually don't think it's going to work. I think there's little things more offensive to believers than wearing their faith like a skin suit.
Yeah,
I think politicians have tried to do this while absolutely not being Christian. I think you can sniff out somebody that's authentic. And I will also say, all the progressive Christians, like, what do you mean all the 25 boomer, white, unmarried women that are, with pink hair, that are in lesbian relationships, that go to his church? Like, how many people are we really talking about here? And I think this is one of those things where, remember, when you turn on social media, when you turn on news, listen, that is always, evil always comes off way bigger than righteousness.
Yeah.
Way bigger, way more, influential. It's the same thing with these, horseshoe right people that are going crazy down the anti-Semitism route. When you actually look at what evangelical Christians and even Catholics believe about Jewish-Christian relations, it does not align with any of them. They feel like they're really, really big, but I think a recent poll came out with all of these people squawking about Iran being the next Iraq. I think it was like their influence was maybe like 5 or 6% of the base. Yeah. There was still a vast majority of the base that's like, we don't believe that.
When we were at AmFest, it was like 13% were like, Israel's not our ally.
And that was young people. That was very young people.
And it was, So I think, and that was in an environment too, where like half the conference was supposedly fighting over this thing. And it's really like this one small group of loud people.
Yeah.
Pastor, I want to follow up with that, because as I was digging in to prepare us to talk about James again this week, I said, what church does James go to, right? What is the doctrine that he's really drinking in? Because we've talked a lot about it, and then after all of this, he has this tweet that goes viral literally last night after I've prepared for all this, and I just thought it highlighted perfectly sort of what I wanted to talk about, which is Brooks Pottinger, who's a pastor, who's actually the pastor that Pete Hegseth sat and still sits under, it was talking on his church's show, and he said, he's talking about Talarico, and he says, we want him to be crucified with Christ, and we want him, we hope that God kills him and raises him again. And everyone who's not a Christian jumps on this and goes, Brooks Pottinger, the Secretary of War's pastor, said he wants to murder James Talarico. And any Bible-believing Christian reads that and goes, yes, that's the gospel. The idea that I would be crucified with Christ and then raised
Galatians
again.
Galatians 2:20.
No longer I live,
no longer I live, but Christ lives within me. And so I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. And then, with 14 hours ago, already with 2+ million views on his X account, Talarico goes on and responds, twisting the same way that he does with everything. And he says this, he goes, Jesus loves, Christian nationalism kills. You may pray for my death, Pastor, but I still love you. I love you more than you could ever hate me, which is just him knowing full well, or maybe he somehow really doesn't know that that's what the gospel says at all. But either way, he's completely rejecting what was actually said and twisting it in order to portray the gospel as hateful and himself as loving. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think he's gay. So I think he's completely gay. He's a 38-year-old that isn't married, doesn't have kids.
Wasn't expecting that.
I think that his tweets are going viral like syphilis. Okay. And I think that we need to just stop the chain.
Yeah.
Like, that's just unbelievable. Like, I mean, what a beta weak. I mean, this is exactly the attitude that's weak in the church. Yeah. There's no scripture. This is what I always notice with you guys. Yeah. There's no scripture. There's no precept upon precept. There's no digging into what the Bible actually says. There's just constant name calling and gaslighting. And that's perhaps one of the worst ones. I mean, what a wicked person. He literally was like, What's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? A trans child. I mean, a child that's like butchered, abused by their parent. And this is the problem. When you're kind to the cruel, you'll be cruel to the kind. Okay? And this is always what happens. It's an inversion of what's true, good, and beautiful. Yeah. And I think we just keep calling him gay and stop the syphilis spread. That's what I think.
I think we can call it out. And I'd just like to point out to his church too, because, I was like,
By the way, James Talarico, I want to know your last 3 romantic involvements. I want the receipts on the fact that you are not gay. It is now in your court to prove to me, as a 38-year-old beta male who hangs out with a bunch of homosexual boomer women at your church, it's on you now to prove to me that you're not gay. So bring the receipts, bud.
All right.
Well, he did recently say, when he was asked, like, what are you thinking about today? And he said, I'm thinking about all the trans children because I love them so much. That was,
if it's not a furry fetish, it's got to be a trans
That was
fetish.
a quote. But let me tell you, all this stuff does come from somewhere. So I know you guys probably.
I'm over it. I'm sorry. I'm over it. We never edit this show, so it's going to be in there. But
it's going to be in there.
It's at 54, so maybe all the weak people have dropped off the podcast.
They've dropped off. But I have to tell, this is where this comes from. So he attends St. Andrew's Church in Austin, Texas, and on their page, on their website, they give a statement of faith. Yeah, I know. We've lost Pastor Stephen. We'll reel him back in. They have a statement of faith, though, and I want to point this out because this comes from somewhere, and this is why it's important that the church, these kind of churches need to be on the decline. The real churches need to be, need to be on the decline. The real churches need to be on the decline. But when you go to their website, they say things like this: we're Presbyterian, yet our first allegiance is to Christ's gospel of, and then they define the gospel universal love. Yeah. We're Christ-centered, but we respect and learn from all religions of love. As you walk through their statements, what they do is they'll say something that sounds Christian, and then the back half of their statement of faith literally unwinds and removes the Christ, removes the real gospel, removes what's truly Christian from the first part of the statement. And so I encourage people to go read this, because James Talarico didn't come out of maybe he did come out of a test tube, I don't know, but he didn't come out of nowhere. He came from somewhere, and he comes from churches that twist the gospel. They declaw the gospel. They take Christ out. They redefine what love means. They redefine what godliness means. They redefine what righteousness means. And all of it is now into the image of a secularist, humanistic, Marxist perspective that erases anything akin to biblical Christianity. And he is a product. He is a political product of that kind of church environment. These kind of churches do need to die. And the people inside them do need to be crucified to Christ.
Yeah, he probably had a really bad relationship with his father too, and was raised by his mother alone. That would be my guess. We need to dig into that.
I don't know.
But there's something deeply wrong with this version. And you see this all the time. And I say this in our church. It's like, I'm sorry, men, but your wives should not be dragging you to church.
Yeah.
Like there is, and we talk a lot about this. Listen.
James Talarico was raised by a single mother.
Of course he was. I mean.
In Laredo.
By the way, single moms, you do a great job. I was raised by a single mom, but I had men in the church that actually discipled me and walked with me. And this is a big thing, because this is a discipleship problem ultimately. And we talk a lot about masculinity. The truth is, biblical masculinity is so good. You take out the faith, you end up getting the Muslim, or you get James Talarico. You don't get somebody who understands what it means to actually love, care, protect, and provide, not just for your family. Obviously, you take responsibility personally for your own, but that also, your strength covers an entire culture. And so in this is something we talk about a lot, because I think the long game for the church is when we look on our culture and we see things like this going viral, things like this, like catching the zeitgeist of a nation that was literally founded by people fleeing religious persecution, for their Christian faith and conviction. And we see that it's devolved into this. It really comes down to a problem of national discipleship. Believers have to be discipled. He was obviously discipled. There was obviously a void. By the way, I still pray for his soul. But his influence right now, that is so incredibly wicked. And so
it's wicked, and it's antithetical to the real gospel, because the real gospel is, we are wicked, and it's not unloving to say so. It's the most loving thing you can do to tell somebody that they're far from God and that they need him, and that anyone can turn to the Savior. And he's spitting on that gospel with statements like the one he made today.
100%. Somebody should just lovingly pull him aside and just say, hey, James, okay, stop being a homosexual. Okay, open up your Bible. Get into an environment with strong men that will actually help you get your balls back, and actually go and be a part of building something, not just tearing something down. I'm sorry, I know that was really direct, but at some point, like, that's what a dad does. It's like my kids, I'm telling you, my kids hurt their leg, they cut their knee, they want to be hugged, they're going to run to mom, and that's so good. Yeah. But you don't always just need hugs. Yeah. We have this idea that we're just going to hug the world to Jesus. That's not what happens. Truth is huge in the Father, which we represent, an aspect of the Heavenly Father too in our homes. And so, when there's justice, you go to dad. When you want like, mercy and comfort, you go to mom. Those are two sides, and you got to have both. And so
I agree with that.
That's well said.
Yeah. Well said,
how many
Pastor.
times have I called him gay in this episode?
I don't know.
I don't know.
For me, plenty, and for you, maybe not enough.
No, probably not enough.
We've made the
Anyways,
point clear.
Yeah. Do you want one more before we close? Do you just want to say
he's really gay.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today's Culture Review episode. Until next time, this is the Under God Podcast. We can't wait to be with you then. Thank you for joining us today on the Under God Podcast. If this episode encouraged you, share it with a friend or family member. Your support helps us reach more people with God's Word. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and at undergodpodcast.com so that you never miss an episode. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, True Social, and TikTok for more content, behind-the-scenes moments, and faith-filled encouragement throughout the week. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment, join the conversation, and send us your questions. We will be answering them in upcoming Q&A episodes. Until next time, remember to think biblically about the things that matter most.